The CI game devs have just had another podcast episode where a ton of new Lords of the Fallen 2 information was given to us, especially about enemy variety and what they're doing about it. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a whole synopsis of the 40-minute podcast episode in about 8 to 10 minutes. Per usual, I'm not going to cover every single thing that happened in the 40 minutes. However, if you do want to go watch that, I will leave the podcast episode linked down in the description below, so you can go check that out on your own time if you want a full, in-depth, detailed version of every single thing that they said. Now, this particular episode of Lifting the Veil had everything to do with conquering the biggest problem, in my opinion, that they had in Lords of the Fallen 23, which was the enemy variety. They said a ton during this particular interview that they only had about 3 varieties of enemies, or 3 factions, in Lords of the Fallen 2023. However, in Lords of the Fallen 2, they have upped the enemy factions and have around 7 different factions of enemies to fight all throughout Lords of the Fallen. In each one of those factions, there's going to be a ton of different enemies, from large enemies all the way down to small enemies, to make you think about which enemy you need to attack first in order to conquer whatever area of the game that you are in. They are taking this incredibly seriously because they are trying to answer the call that all of the individuals have stated about enemy variety from Lords of the Fallen 2023. That was such a huge issue. There was many people that got so tired of fighting the same Umbral enemies and the same enemies from the beginning of the game all the way at the end, and they have assured us in this interview that that is 100% not going to be happening. In fact, the devs went as far as to say that in each different biome, and if you want to know about the biomes, I'll link my video I did on this last time we did a Lords of the Fallen video in the description below, but each biome is going to have a different faction, and you will not see the same enemies that you saw in the last biome in the new biome. I think this is a huge step in the right direction for the Lords of the Fallen dev team, and it gives me a ton of hope for Lords of the Fallen 2 to be able to provide us with in-depth, fun, and amazing gameplay with the enemies. The devs talked at length about each enemy and the entire process they take to design them. In fact, some enemies within the game have taken as long as 3 months to design, and they're coming at this with the angle of each enemy is going to be a different problem for the player to solve. Each enemy is going to have its own mechanics, it's going to have its own way of destroying it, and there is definitely a possibility, because they alluded to this in the interview as well, that there's a new system for the enemies that are going to allow them to be self-aware or aware of their surroundings, so they could use different hazards against you. They can also team up with enemies that are already in the area to destroy you, so it looks like they are doing a lot to make sure that the players are satiated with enemy variety within Lords of the Fallen 2 and learning from all the mistakes that were made in Lords of the Fallen 2023. Now, with all the different screenshots they showed us of different enemy types and concept art, we can actually glean a little bit of information about what each biome could look like. With these 2 pieces of concept art right here, it looks like one of the biomes is going to be a very marine or aquatic biome. As you can see, the barnacles and marine life coming out of the skeleton, as well as some of the barnacles that are coming out of this particular night, and all of the colors are very aquatic. We can even look at different concept art that they showed us that we went over in our last Lords of the Fallen video, that this looks like a very aquatic civilization or faction as well. And from those screenshots they also showed us, we have this very fiery, broken down, ruined area, which I'm assuming this fiery skeleton is going to be a part of. It's very cool to see the game slowly take shape as things are more and more revealed to us from the factions, the biomes where they could be. And granted, this is speculation right now, but it does seem like they're finally putting all the puzzle pieces together to let us know more about what is happening with Lords of the Fallen 2 as 2025 comes to a close. Now, one of the last things I want to talk about in this particular video is they did reveal a few of the names of some of the enemies to us, as well as this particular fact. As you progress through the storyline and as you play Lords of the Fallen 2, some of your environments are going to change based on your decisions. Something they've thought really hard about and are going to implement in Lords of the Fallen 2 is the fact that the factions within these particular areas that change are also going to change how they look, or their architecture is also going to change based on if you make a decision to have something kind of take over a faction, or you have a group of people or an area start to crumble based on some of your decisions. Your enemies are also going to change how they look, which is absolutely phenomenal. And they harped again on the storytelling based on the architecture or area of the factions that you are in. And this is only going to help benefit that, getting the player lost in the actual gameplay and lore of Lords of the Fallen 2. Some of the names that we got for some enemies that we're going to be facing are the tank, which I'm only going to assume is a massive hulking enemy that's going to be very hard to kill because it will be a damage sponge. The other one is described as a super visceral enemy called the Puppeteer, which I can only imagine, because they're going bolder and bloodier with Lords of the Fallen 2, that the Puppeteer is going to be controlling people via some kind of entrails or something along those lines, which is going to be super gross. And lastly, we got the Lunatic, which I'm assuming is just going to be an absolute savage and very fast, very hard to kill, challenging us in ways that we have not seen yet before in the Lords of the Fallen universe. Now, one thing they did not mention, which I can only speculate about, is the fact that these 7 factions seem separate from Umbral. Now, they haven't answered the fact if these Umbral enemies are all going to be one faction, or as you go through different biomes, as they stated in their previous video, Umbral will change. I don't know if the enemies within Umbrals will also change based on the biome you're in, or if each faction will have an Umbral version. That is just remaining to be seen. But there were a few questions that were answered at the end of the podcast, one of which being, can you customize your own character? The answer is yes. You can make and customize your own characters, and that means full customization, picking your starting class, your look of your character, and then jumping right into the Lords of the Fallen 2. The other thing that is incredibly cool is your Lords of the Fallen character from 2023 will appear in some way within Lords of the Fallen 2. I think that is incredible. I'm not sure if it will be a statue commemorating one of your crusaders that you had in the beginning, or the hero you were years and years ago, but that is really cool that they're going to wink back to that as well. Lastly, NPC side quests are going to be much more direct than something you would find in an Elden Ring or Dark Soul or FromSoft type of game. Basically, they said those type of quest lines drive them crazy, and you will know whether you are or are not going to get locked out of a quest based on how you progress it. Everything will be very laid out for you, so you will not have to keep guessing. But guys, that is going to be it for everything they discussed about enemy diversity and enemies moving into Lords of the Fallen 2 and changes they're making from Lords of the Fallen 2023. If you like this type of content and want to stay up to date with all things Lords of the Fallen 2, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification on your way out. I will leave everything you need linked down in the description below that I discussed. And until next time, guys, stay safe, enjoy the game, and I'll see you in the next one.